All right, welcome along everyone to our flexible milking webinar. For those that do not know me, I'm Vanessa Robinson and I work as a developer in the feed and animal team. And as part of the flexible milking project, I'm working closely with the three Canterbury, North Otago based pilot farmers for the project over this season. With joining me today from DairyNZ is Paul Edwards, who is the Flexible Milking Project Manager. So he'll be supporting me today, helping to field the questions, provide some input and work alongside me today. A little bit of housekeeping. So you hopefully can see and hear all of us. We can't see or hear you guys, so that's automatically turned off for you. However, you can communicate with us through the Q&A section, so that should show up as a bar at the top of your screen. So if you do have any questions throughout the session, please pop them in there. This is going to be quite an interactive session, so we will kick off with some questions to the pilot farmers. We'll get them to introduce themselves and then start a few questions rolling, and then we'll have a plenty chance to attack and answer some of the questions coming from you guys as well. So please pop them through the whole time. And if you do have a question that's specific for one of the farmers we're talking to, let us know who it is you'd like to direct that to, so that we can make sure that happens. So what we're going to do, as I said, is we're going to get each of the farmers to introduce themselves. So we'll start at the top of the country, and Nick and Rick, if you want to tell people where you're based and a bit about your farm.
G'day everyone. So I'm Nick and this is my manager Rick. We farm about 20 minutes north of Tauranga in the Bay of Plenty. We've got a small farm, so 76 hectares, and we're currently milking 214 cows. I don't know, do you need more than that, Vanessa? Or?
No, that's perfect. Some of you may have seen in the latest update, or if you've just been on the website, we've also had a story about Nick and Rick and their journey so far too. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to check that out. Moving further south and across the other side of the country, Daryl and Karen.
Yeah, good afternoon everybody. I'm Daryl, my wife here Karen. So we're 15 k's east of Stratford, pretty much central Taranaki, and we're milking 460 cows on 170 effective platform. We have a self-contained operation, and we've chosen a 3-in-2 system to actually improve a few categories within our business.
And this is our second season doing the 3-in-2 full season.
Awesome, thanks Daryl and Karen. John.
Hey, I'm based in Staveley, which is mid-Canterbury, right up against the hills, so we're dry land, 1,000 cows, 330 hectares, so 3 cows to the hectare. And we run those over 2 sheds, but carve everything through one and start supply at that same shed. And then once we get up to 300 cows, we shift them to the second shed. They've been milked on once a day for the first 3 weeks. Once we shift them across, we then keep the shed we're carving through at once a day for another 3 weeks, which gets us across halfway. And yeah, this is our first season of 10-7, but we have used 3-in-2 and 10-7 starting usually around February.
Awesome, thanks John. And Angela. You're on mute, Angela.
I'm Angela from North South Farms in Northern Southland at 5 Rivers. 463 effective areas. We winter everything on within that, so we've got 43 hectares of fodder beet out of the round most of the time, and winter 1,300 cows, peak milk 1,250. And last year we tried 3-in-2 in December and went 10-7 in February.
Just, I guess, to clarify then from these guys, as you can see, we've got quite a range in, size, scale and location around the country, which is awesome to see. But what we also have is quite a range in terms of hours and milking. So as John said, he's 10-7. Angela, we've got at 12, 18, 18. Nick is at 10, 19, 19. And Daryl and Karen are at 11, 18 and 19. So also got quite a range there in terms of how they've implemented it on farm, and you can see on that screen there also just as a bit of an interest, and we'll pop it up again as we talk into the subject too around where their mating times are slotting in around that too, because that's been a big topic of interest lately. So just wanted to make sure you guys could see how they're going in, and we'll make sure we share this resource at the end with you as well, so you can reflect back on it. So we will jump right in, and first question to Nick and Rick. What were you worried about when making the decision to go full season 3 and 2, and what gave you the confidence to try?
So over the last sort of 3 seasons, we farm out on a peninsula, so we know we're going to have a dry summer, and we're sort of right on the Tauranga Harbour. And so the last few years we've used 3 and 2 from Christmas onwards as a summer dry strategy, really, to extend our lactation and reduce the amount of walking for the cows. And this season we decided, after looking at some of Paul's trial data, that we were keen to give full season a go. And I guess our main concern initially was production loss was probably the main thing. We're thinking, well, you know, what's this going to hit us? I wasn't keen to go once a day. We wanted to free up some management time. So I wanted Rick, who's 3 years into farming, that's from scratch, he's managing it. I wanted to make it sustainable for Rick while I stepped back and started working on an avocado orchard we're developing. So those were the kind of reasons to do it. Our concerns were, production loss, what would happen over the peak period of production, and I guess also getting our heads around the grazing was probably one of the problems. And the confidence to do it was, we'd already tried 3 and 2 through the summer. We were comfortable with how it worked, and we quite liked the hours, especially when we saw through Paul's trials, the hours don't need to be locked in. When we first started, we were doing sort of those horrible hours late at night and stuff. So now we've gone to 19s and 10, and that suits us. It's fine.
Awesome. And Nick, Rick, do you have anything to add to that from, like the manager perspective?
Around concerns, after following Paul's trial, most of my concerns were alleviated, to be fair. He proved that the production loss was minimum over the whole season, and yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, so actually seeing some solid data gave you some of that confidence to
for sure
get through. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. And just a reminder to those of you listening, if you do have any questions, please pop them throughout. We'll weave them in when they're appropriate. So feel free to jot those down as you think of them. Moving on to Karen and Daryl, a question for you. What has been the impact at the farm system or business level for you guys?
Okay, I guess the impact was improving our situations that we're hoping to improve. So at the end of the day, it was our high empty rates that took us towards this landing of 3 and 2, and what were the pros and cons of doing so. So we've had to work through those issues. And
so we had like an 18% empty rate in our herd overall, and it was actually higher in our young cows. And despite running 2 herds and keeping our young cows close, we weren't improving that. So our options were either that we trucked in a whole bunch of more feed, or that we used a lot of seeders. We're quite committed to a low cost system. So we considered the options of either 3 and 2 for the entire herd, or once a day for the young cows. And with our farm setup, distances, and our 2 staff, we sort of thought that the 3 and 2 was the way to go. We sort of did it before we had Paul's data from last year. So we sort of took a leap of faith and decided that it would probably take 3 years for a system change. And so that's what we were committing to. And we also wanted to reduce both our staff hours, and just thought this was sustainable going forward. So the outcomes from our first season.
Yeah, so outcomes were our reduced empty rate, we're hitting 18%, so I thought this was not really sustainable in our business going forward. So after implementing this, we dropped down to 11.7% empties in our first year, which resulted in a 5% empty rate in our first calvers and a 3% empty rate in our second calvers. So, which was fantastic. We also had a production drop of about 10%, which equated to about a 4.5% decline per cow in milk solids.
Overall,
yeah.
our farm working expenses we thought would decrease, but because we had less production, our farm working expenses actually increased slightly. However, the areas that we thought would decrease did. So we had a drop in expenses in feed, in our shed power and in our fuel, and they were rather significant. Expenses that went up that we sort of didn't see, but really we could probably account for. Our animal health was actually up a little bit. So we had a little bit more mastitis. We didn't quite get our meal blend correct with our minerals at the beginning of spring. So we had some extra magnesium and stuff that we were bringing in. And our fertiliser was up, but that's more us just trying to get back to what we should be doing. Overall, our staff hours, which was also one of our targets, was we reduced them on average 12 hours a fortnight. So brought them down to 43 hours and 46 hours respectively. Overall, our production drop, there was a couple of other factors as well that are not 3 and 2 related. So we actually milked 25 less cows last year. And we also went once a day mid-February, which we normally wouldn't. And I suppose overall, like our assumption was the worst. We had done 3 and 2 for many years post-summer or post-Christmas and hadn't had a production loss. So one of our assumptions was that we wouldn't have a production loss in that second half of the season. However, we just tracked the same sort of production drop post our peak. So we didn't save anything. So through the peak from sort of end of July through to December, we were 8% behind for the season. But from January through to the end of season, we actually dropped 11%. So we sort of didn't see that in. So we had budgeted for a 10,000 milk solid drop, which was about 5%. We ended up with a 10%, so slightly more than what we anticipated. But yeah, there was a couple of other factors in there. Overall though, I'm still quite committed. Our main goal was our empty rates and we achieved that, a good start in our first season.
Also our second season into it now, we're currently 11% ahead of the previous year.
Yes.
So it gives us encouragement we need to get back to our twice a day normal production systems anyway. So yeah. Anything else here?
No, I think that's definitely covered a fair bit around that one, and cool to be able to see that second season flowing through and how it's impacting.
Yeah.
So thank you guys. John, one for you. Have there been any unexpected benefits?
I guess not unexpected, but you know, we were hoping for a big drop in lameness and hoping for a gain in condition. I guess what's been unexpected is how much better the cows look. Like they were all condition scored above 4 at the start of mating. I was expecting to maybe see a result of that by the end of the season, and to already see them looking so much better than we've ever had them so quickly, that's been a bit of a shock. And again, lameness, we're expecting a drop, but it's nice to see in reality that that actually does happen. White lines dropped close to 80%. I haven't fully done the numbers on it, but I'm in a dryland discussion group and most guys are starting to treat 2 or 3 a day. Some guys have changed to 16 hours. It's getting that bad. You know, we're doing 2 or 3 in a week versus them. And I guess milk production too, we definitely took a hit at peak. We were ahead early on, but now coming out of peak, we're actually ahead per cow on last season. We're up 5%, and that's not taking into consideration as a per cow basis. So we're 15% ahead this month. So that's been pleasing to see. They peaked a lot lower, but they've just held a lot better.
Yeah, excellent. And just going to throw that out to Nick and Rick as well. Have you guys had any unexpected benefits that you've noticed?
I guess it's probably a little bit early for us to tell, but like Dale and Karen, we had big empty rates as well, and that was one of the triggers for it. And so far, mating for us has gone better than we've ever done it. We've traditionally, we always get to our sort of 85 to 90% 3-week submission rates, but we've been doing it with massive use of seeders, up to half the herd in the past. The last couple of years, I've capped that at 25% seeder use. This year, we got to 89% and we only used 12% seeders. So I see a gain there. And like John, the cow condition is also, that's been held higher. We're sort of, yeah, we're pretty happy with where the cows are at. So I think that is an improvement on last season. Anything else, Rick?
One thing I was surprised about was udder structure. I thought we may have a few cows filter through that couldn't handle the system, but we haven't found that. So that was a good surprise.
Oh, definitely. Cool. Thanks, guys. Back to you guys, Karen and Daryl. What have you found most challenging?
Yeah, I suppose most challenging, you know, we actually have 4 smaller farms that we've put together to try to make one bigger unit. So therefore we're actually constrained by a bit of terrain. We have some hill country, creeks and a major river as our boundary. So really none of our paddocks are not a square paddocks as you can achieve in other parts of the country. So paddock size in general was our biggest concern, and getting the right area for the cows and for the right feed. So what we ended up doing is analysing which were our larger paddocks, which are our smaller paddocks, and on a 19-hour feed, which is the longest period of time, we had to go to a larger area paddock to try and target those. However, what we've also changed to now is milking at say 10 AM, they'll go to a first smaller paddock and then maybe 4 PM shift them to another smaller paddock to give them the required area. So I guess we've had to manipulate paddock sizes around quite a bit. Another challenge was, I guess, milk calling within the vat. So if you get 2 long period milkings together, one on the end of each other, our vat capacity was full, and therefore that puts stress on milk calling and the vat itself starting to continue that. So we talked to Fonterra and we actually changed our pickup times. So now our pickup times are 1 large milking and 1 small milking, for example, and therefore the milk volumes are easier catered for within the vat system.
I suppose another thing is that it was too awkward to feed the calves twice a day, so they just simply went to a once a day system because we weren't going to be feeding them after the late milking. Tweaking the staff hours for the long day, so just making sure that we were actually getting a reduction in hours. So sometimes not only do we have a late start, so they don't start to 8 o'clock, but actually sometimes they don't start to 9 o'clock. And on the long days, they always had at least 2 hours break in the afternoon. And I suppose another thing was just the AI. So, and I'm sure everybody, you know, as you say, it's been quite topical. So Daryl does our AI, but there would obviously be implications as far as technicians go. But even the fact that he does our own, it means he's in the shed that whole every other day during the middle of the day. And that's when he has a whole bunch of jobs like fruit spraying and chemical, you know, so fruit spreading and spraying and mowing and all of those sort of day jobs. So it sort of feels like we get a little bit behind for 4 weeks through the mating period.
Yeah, and also I did AI after each milking because that was our primary focus to get more cows and calf anyway. So if I saw a cow and calf, I just did the job, just stay on top.
And that was easily manageable because you are DIY as well, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
Awesome. Just bouncing off that, you guys talked about your calf feeding, and I know Nick and Rick, you guys changed up your calf rearing system as well. Do you want to just briefly talk to us about what you guys did?
Right, so we changed to the ad-lib calf feeding system. For us, we only reared 40 replacements, so quite easy to make the change. We had 2 pens of 20 calves, with a 200 litre plastic drum in the corner of each pen with 2 teats on it and tubes down into the bottom. And we just keep that full with cold milk. So you're not feeding calves after milking or trying to find time in the afternoon to do it. Taking milk there basically whenever it's empty, and boy did it work well. The calves drank more colostrum than we thought they could. On a cold night, they drink up to 10 litres of colostrum. And without any scours and that, because they're not drinking it all at once, they're coming and going as they need it. And at weaning, our calves are about 10 kilos heavier on that date the year before, or in all previous years.
All previous years, yeah.
It worked really well. And it sort of solved the problem of finding time to feed the calves, like you say, after the late milking or coming back in the late afternoon after your lunchtime milking to feed them.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Angela, being from a bigger team, obviously there's a lot of people to manage. So what kind of feedback have you had from staff around this change?
So I've got 6 staff, and I put out a question about feedback and got some back. So positives was more time with family and friends, more sleeping, they're getting enough rest, they're happy, minimum stress, they can see the change in cow condition, less lame cows, they do 4 earlies a fortnight, so every other day is a sleeping. Milking's done before the hot part of the day, so they're not milking in that early afternoon when it's quite hot. And we've also seen a reduction in 50 hours a fortnight in their hours over the whole team. The negatives is mostly to do with the once a day milking, so they find themselves a lot busier on the once a day milkings because you've still got drenching and weighing calves and fencing and other bits and pieces to be doing. And fitting in lunch breaks around that once a day milking if they're milking over their lunch hour. And if they do have to do a double, so both milkings, then they just milk and go home for the middle of the day and then come back in time for their night milking. But all in all, they're really happy once we got our system sorted around timing and everything.
And how long did that take, to help kind of get into a good groove?
Well, in the spring, we probably took a good week to get into the groove of things on what was happening when, because we're so used to having that whole day time to do anything, but the shed was being held up with those once a day milkings, so we just changed our system a little bit, and it worked really good.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ange. And John, we've had a few questions come through, so this is quite fitting, but how did you manage mating with your local technician? And I'll just pop that screen up again so you guys can see the times while he talks.
We were very lucky. I just, we had the meeting before AI started, and I asked if I could have 3 different AI times, and she said she would ask the other farmers, because the 1 o'clock one obviously doesn't affect anyone else, so that wasn't an issue. But the 9 o'clock one did mean that there were 2 farms after myself that one day one of them got done at 9 and the next day he got done at 9:30, and then it pushed the other shed after him half an hour. But they said they were happy with that. That didn't affect their system. And then on the Sunday she was coming at 11 a.m. So I guess I was lucky that no other farmers had issues with it, and so she just turned up when we wanted her, and it's worked brilliant. We haven't had any issues whatsoever.
Awesome. And also just going to jump on Angela there, because you'll note on the slide that we have made some changes to your AB times after a few weeks. Do you want to talk through that for us?
Yeah, so our technician lives on farm anyway, so it wasn't too much of an issue for getting our times. We did 1 mating a day for the first week of AI, while he was busy doing all the heifers in the area as well, and he does 4 other dairy farms, so he was really busy. And then in the second week, I got nervous because we had 30 hours between our AI times, and we got him in at nights as well before he went to his night shed. He could fit us in, and it all sort of worked in really good. So when we did change our mating, we also changed the time that we started as well in the afternoon. So we were 4, 4 and 10, and we changed to 4, 3 and 9. And the staff quite like that 9 o'clock, because they'd start work at 8 o'clock and have to go and do something and then come back for milking, where now they start at 8 o'clock still, but there's people out washing vats and getting cows in, so they're pretty much straight to work at 8 o'clock, ready for a 9 o'clock milking. Yeah, so we'll see if we can get how we get around that first week mating, if we can start earlier or change our times a little bit to try and fit in with all the heifers at mating time.
Yep, that's awesome. And Nick and Rick, I believe you guys are using a technician too, but you've flipped onto the evening side of things.
Yeah, so we were traditionally AB in the evening anyway, after the evening milking, so around 5 o'clock. So it wasn't actually a big stretch for our technician. He was very accommodating. So we're doing 6 o'clock after the late milking, and then about 3 after the lunchtime milking. So we just hold the cows back. It really hasn't been a huge change for us, and it seems to work well. So
yeah, but I guess obviously proof is in the pudding. So we're still waiting on actual pregnancy testing results, but it's really promising to see that, you know, all of you are very positive about how the cows are going. You know, they're in good nick and we've had good submission rates. So, you know, that's a really good, promising start. Just flicking over to some questions from the floor. Maybe one for you, Paul. What was the history of 10 and 7? How did it come about? And I guess from that evolution of 16 hours.
Well, the concept of 3 and 2 has actually been around a long time. I found a study right back from 1978 that was looking at milking 3 times in 2 days. So yeah, conceptually it's been there for quite a while. I think probably started gaining a bit more interest. Brent Boyce up in the top of the south through the early 2000s sort of was had a lot of people doing it up there, and I think he's learned a lot about the hours side of things as the system kind of evolved. And 10 and 7 itself, I mean, the background behind that, I guess, comes from that 3 and 2 has that fortnightly cycle. So you don't necessarily know from a given day of the week what, how many milkings you've got. So it can make forward planning a little bit more challenging. So 10 and 7 locking it down into that weekly cycle and giving 1 milking each day on the weekend. And again, we've probably got Brent to thank for really promoting that concept to people, and really in terms of the science side of things, we haven't specifically investigated it, but the concept is that by taking that 1 extra milking out every fortnight, there's only a small extension of the intervals over that Saturday night, Sunday night kind of period. So.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. And so John, one of the farmers, has asked, what have you found the main difference between 3 and 2 and 10 and 7? Because you talked how you've done a bit of both in the past.
Paul's kind of started on that, the planning side of things. Wasn't the main reason, but it was definitely one of the reasons for trying the 10 and 7. You know, it's so easy if someone asks you to plan something in 3 months' time, you know exactly what day you're going to be milking or what times you're going to be milking on those days. And from the staff wellbeing point of view, having 2 once-a-day milkings in the weekend is just brilliant. I mean, we're 10 a.m. and 8 a.m, so you can go out with mates, you can catch up with people, you can do stuff. And quite often I end up covering most weekends, and you're home by 1 p.m. each day with everything done. You know, you kind of feel like you haven't even worked the weekend, to be honest. So it is brilliant from that point of view. It really feels like a break over the weekend.
Awesome. And whilst we're on 10 and 7, another question that's come through is how do you manage your grazing with 10 and 7? This farmer does 24-hour grazing, so is asking would they move their cows before that 10 a.m. milking. So you want to talk through how you manage that?
So we're targeting 19.5-hour breaks, 19.5-hour breaks, and then 10-hour breaks, and then over the weekend we adjust that to 22 hours. And we haven't found it a problem. You know, we just have the area that we should be doing every 24 hours, and it's 80% for the 19-hour break, and it's 40% for the 10-hour break, and then for the 22 hours, it's 22% of a 24-hour break. So we've got big paddocks, so we just adjust the break size, and we've had no issues with residuals or cleaning up. Still just the same management. You send them back if you have to, or if they finish it, you're on to the next paddock. But I guess if you're on a 24-hour system, we did run that last autumn. We just run a 24-hour system, and it did seem to work. And if you did want to stay on that, we just had the paddock. So if they were shifting at say 7 a.m. before the 10 a.m. milking, we just had a break set up close to the cow shed. So you'd kind of already got that walk out of the road anyway. So I think it's possible to do it either way.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen from a lot of farmers around the country is that there's still a lot of different ways of doing it, and it doesn't have to be complicated. So yeah, it's great to see that people can use those different options. Daryl and Karen, you mentioned that you reduce feed costs. So a question around how did that come about, and do you think this influenced your production drop?
Yeah, well, basically with the system, it's real easy to be on a longer rotation. So therefore we're more self-contained with our feeds. So we make all our own silage and hay to be self-contained. But what we also realised in the first year, we actually dropped our meal feeding by 100 tonne for that first year.
I think that was more the fact that there was lots of grass in the paddock, and the cows were actually coming to the shed only 3 times in 2 days, not 4 times. And so what they could eat in the shed was less as well. So it was very obvious early in spring that we had over-ordered. So again, it was a kind of spring. So do I think it impacted? I think like I said, through the early part of the year, we had that 8% production drop, which we sort of expected. It was the second part of the year that we didn't see. So we still had meal being offered into the shed, but we were not ever going to change the blend to a high cost type blend. So it's a very simple blend of PK soybean, some tapioca and stuff through spring. And minerals, so we weren't going to put in more expensive type feeds either. Pretty much they were just in the shed 25% more, so we didn't up what they were offered because we had plenty of grass in the paddock.
And have you noticed a similar thing this year, or?
Yes, yeah. So pretty much, yeah, same thing this year. So we ordered less and we're pretty much right on target for what they're eating. Again, we sort of thought last year, because we pushed supplement early, like there was lots of grass, but quality changed. So we made hay before Christmas last year, whereas normally we would have done 2 cuts of silage. And so we thought perhaps our quality was a real factor with us dropping production sort of that December, January. We had really big hits, but we've done the same this year. Like we've struggled to get the silage off. We've had a lot of bad weather, well, good weather, we've still got grass.
We've had about 300 mils of rain in this last month, so it's made it challenging. So a lot of feed was forced forward and before it not cut soon enough. So therefore you fall into a bit of a hole if those paddocks do not recover soon enough. So that part of it was a bit challenging. So
we've tried harder to get the grass quality better this year, but we've still sort of seen the same drop off through both November and December. So
yeah, well, it seems to be quite common in the district though this year. We've had so much rain recently, our pastures have actually are looking a bit stressed and horrible. So I guess there's the heavy rains within itself has actually affected the cows. So that's maybe, I'm hoping that's our reason why our production has dropped off a bit this November, December. However, cow condition is very good. We're very happy with that. So I think we probably underestimate the stress the cow goes through. So, but reducing the stress and seeing their better condition, it tells me that, yeah, they're actually better off in the system.
Yeah, no, that's really cool to see. Thanks, guys. John, Rosanna's asking that building on what Rick mentioned around his concern around the udders and the capacity going on that, did you have any concerns around your udders with the longer breaks over the weekend on 10 and 7?
We're probably fortunate we've got the right cow for it. We're 75% jerseys already. I've been breeding for once a day type cow for the last 7 years. And a big part of that's been focused on udder strength. I guess it was still concerned that there'd be some cows in there that wouldn't cope, but so far all the udders look good, and I think they've come through that peak milk in good condition. We definitely haven't blown out any udders.
Awesome, thank you. I think earlier on, Karen, were you talking around an increase in mastitis from your first season?
Yes, we definitely did have an increase in mastitis in our first season. And then
just building on and keep going, but just also asking around, do you attribute that to 3 and 2 with that change, or were there some other factors coming in when you saw that increase?
I think like we had a large proportion of the herd that are considered old cows. So I think probably 28 to 30% were above 9-year-olds. So quite an old herd. So they have adapted less successfully to the 3 and 2. Interesting enough, they were the girls that also worked super hard, having to walk up hills and long distances. So, but they struggled to get back and calf on the 3 and 2 system more than our younger cows. So part of it is the age of the herd. This year we've certainly improved slightly our mastitis rate, but like Daryl said, we've had a very wet last couple of months. So our lame cows are up compared to last year. Significant improvement last year in lame cows, but our somatic cell count for the season to date sitting at 113. For the season last year, we finished at 139. So we had more clinical mastitis, but yeah, it's manageable. I think it'll come down. Certainly, if we get more cows and calf, we will have culling options, and in the end, that's what we need.
Lisa, can I just jump in? So, yep, we thought somatic cells and cell count mastitis was going to be a big problem. We were expecting that to peak because we'd gone from Christmas onwards, our cell count had pretty much doubled. So this time last year, we were probably sitting at 180, 200,000 average cell count, and absolute opposite happened. So our cell count has just crashed down to about 60 to 70,000 most of the way through. We have had a few more clinical cases in the last month or so, but then the conditions have been rife for that. So I guess that's not surprising. But overall, our cell count has massively reduced, which we really weren't expecting to see.
And that might pay to also talk through your, change in milking routine, I guess, with, you've got longer milkings now and you've taken advantage of that time to like check for a weekly stripping or something.
Yeah, so part of the change we did make some changes which may have affected that. So we did take some weight out of the clusters, a couple of kgs actually, or 1 kg out of the clusters and changed the liners. But then we also moved to max T, which is, the milking by time. I don't know if you guys have seen. So we milk to a time, and that means that's given us a lot more time in the shed. So we just start cupping, go right through, don't go back for any cows. And then we wait. So that time's meant that on once a week, Ricky's had more than enough time to strip the herd to check. So we've been getting mastitis early. And Max T's also meant that I can leave Ricky to do all the heat checking because he's got so much time. He's got like 5 minutes a row through that period in which he can up and check every cow. So changes. So teat spraying has also been improved because again, you've got a lot more time. So you're not rushing through trying to get the cows out. So with Max T, the milkings have become a lot more relaxed and stressless, and a lot more time to do a bit more of a detailed job on all of that stuff, which, yeah, you're right, Paul, probably did have quite an.
Awesome, thanks guys. Anyone else, either John or Angela, have either of you had any issues with mastitis and smack cell since making the switch?
No, we're still averaging the same cell count as last year. Yeah, we're 110, but I mean, one sheep to pick up yesterday was 60. We've been wet. We're wet through November, but we haven't had decent rain in 2 weeks. So I'd like to think that cell count will just continue to drop. And mastitis at the start of the season, when we had calved near 700 cows and we'd had 4 clinical cases, like it was the best year we've ever had yet. A lot of guys on the dryland discussion group were having big issues. So I can't attribute that to 10 and 7, but it definitely hasn't made it any worse.
Awesome.
Yeah, so cell count is up on last year, but I'm fairly sure it's not due to 3 and 2. It's we were feeding cows on and off of crop paddocks all spring through wet periods, which didn't help. So you know, even last year when we went from twice a day to 3 and 2, we never saw an increase in cell count. So we were pretty convinced it's not 3 and 2 milking is why our cell count is higher.
Awesome. All right, one final question, and this is going to be for all of you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to do this next season? So we'll start with John, because you're at the top of my screen.
Yeah, still a lot of the season to go, but right now as we sit, probably 10. I'm not ever thinking about going back to milking twice a day, to be honest. Yeah, we had 2 months. I had employed a new manager and he wasn't finishing up at Lincoln for 2 months, but he was a right fit for our team. So we didn't employ anyone else. I had someone come in twice a week so I could paint the cows. And, you know, we cruised through. Like, I thought it was going to be quite stressful and busy, lacking that team member. But just the extra time we had with 10 and 7, yeah, we got through it easily. And so I guess they have that flexibility in your system. Of being able to drop someone out for a while, you know, that's pretty hard to beat. And now we've got a full team, we're 100% cruising. So, and as I said, we've started to pick back up on milk. We're ahead per cow for this month. Yeah, no, I can't see a change.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Daryl and Karen.
No, we're actually committed to the process. A second year now, we're actually getting a handle on more of what we thought could have been some issues. That's all getting better. But all the advantages of are too good to ignore. So now we're in a 10 out of 10, we're going to carry on. But it's human sustainability and animal sustainability, it all falls into those categories and beneficial across the board. We have one staff member with young kiddies, she has more freedom. Us ourselves, we have more family freedom too, or do other things as well. That second day, where you're milking that once a day, that afternoons, etc., you know, you actually can get time to catch up on jobs or have some free time. So now we love it.
Thanks, Daryl and Karen. Angela.
Yeah, no, I think we'll probably be staying. All depends on the powers above, but yeah, no, I'm pretty convinced. Like, I think we do need to do 3 years to see a good change and some comparative results, because comparing this year and last year is just not fair. And you make all your changes in your first year and you want to reap the benefits and compare for next year. So it's definitely at least 3 years, I think. But I think my staff would be pretty gutted if we went back to twice a day. Although
well, that's telling in itself.
We would love to do 10 and 7 as well. So we're all watching John on that, just to get it even easier than what it is. So
yeah, that's fair enough, and it's great that we do have one. You know, we do have John doing that for us to all see. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
and
definitely.
Nick and Rick.
Well, interestingly, the decision's probably been taken out of our hands a little bit. We really had to go through the resource consent for our effluent system, and we used the fact that we were doing 3 and 2 and reducing our effluent production by 25% as a way to get an extended term, and they've now put that on the consent. So we are locked in And but we have no reason to change. And I guess I don't know, Rick.
No, I love it. 10 out of 10, carry on. The only thing we probably move to going forward would be 10 and 7, potentially.
I mean,
that's even better on your consent.
For Rick this season is he's got a new baby and he hasn't really been tired or stressed at all this season. It's been relatively easy. And so, as Daryl said, it's sustainable for staff. So it's a good system and we're happy with it. And then currently we're sitting ahead of last year production-wise, which was a good start for us last year. So we haven't seen any drop yet.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, it's interesting to see the different flow-on effects of that in terms of your, effluent resource consent. I'm sure that probably isn't the reason anyone thinks of going to do that, but some of those byproducts out of it, that's really cool to see how else it can impact on the full season.
Yeah.
I did say that was final question, but we've had one come through from Gray. Is anyone keen to go full Monty with once a day? There's lots of shaking heads around. I thought it might be a unanimous, but I thought I'd better ask the question. So hopefully that answers that for you, Gray. People are loving the flexible milking strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just straight out of production issue, isn't it?
Yeah, for us. Yeah, couldn't risk. It's just a production issue. Yeah. Couldn't risk it.
There is already a lot of information out there about once a day systems anyway. I think, Colin Holmes led down that track really, really well. So we didn't really want to have that production drop really as a hard hit to start off with. We just wanted more ease into it, potentially down the track.
We like the 10 and 7 sound, the 10 and 4. Yeah. So 4 days of once a day sounds fine.
I mean, there's room to evolve in the system. You might come across something that doesn't quite suit your personal situation, so you can tweak your hours within that. And I think that's the beauty of it, really. But there are a lot of spin-off things. So as Nicky said about the effluent, we've actually done the same thing. We've just got a new consent going to land application now. 25% less effluent is what the councils love to see as well. So there's spin-offs from that too. You're using less water than the farm dairy, and there's other uses there that can be saved. And there's run-on costs, saving our bike fuels as well, less bike maintenance. So there actually are run-on costs from different activities as well, which can be saved.
Awesome. Thanks for elaborating on that too. It's always cool to understand the why. Obviously, it was a very big general consensus there with all of you shaking your heads, but cool to kind of know a little bit more around what that why is for you guys. I know that a couple of you, I'm looking at John and Nick here, have had some milk cooling issues. Do either of you want to talk through?
Yeah, so unexpected one for us. So what's happening? You're doing your we're isolated in terms of tanker pickup. There's not many tankers going past us, so they like to be able to pick us up in the morning every day. Over summer, in the previous season, when we've gone on 3 and 2, they've always picked up the late in the evening milking on its own, so the lowest volume milking, and then the 2 high volume milkings going into the vat and being picked up over summer. But as we found coming into peak this year, our vat capacity could not hold those 2 high volume milkings together. We had discussions with Fonterra. They adjusted their tanker time to come after the 10 a.m. milking, which worked great, except what we're doing is we're putting, so for us, we've got 1,500 litres of milk from the evening milking, and then we're going and putting 3,500 litres on top of that of warm milk, and really struggling to meet the blend temperature requirements. So we're looking through options at the moment of upgrading pre-coolers and so on and so forth to manage that. But yeah, that's when you're making the decision to think about vat storage capacity and tanker times and how that's all going to work for you.
I think Fonterra are going to work around it for us. They haven't fully finalised, but we were trying to talk them into a double pickup for a little while, just for maybe 2 or 3 weeks over the peak. Otherwise, yeah, we're looking at a bigger vat, and with a bigger vat, we'll have to upgrade our cooling system. So there could be a significant amount of cost involved in that for a small operation like ours. But we're still working our way through it.
Awesome, thanks. And John, you had a slightly different milk cooling issue, I believe.
Yeah, so one shed already had no issues, and it still has no issues, but the main shed we were already struggling, to be fair, through summer. It's a gravity feed system, and it just heats up. So the shed was already having issues, but then simply by putting an even greater volume of milk through the cooling system on those 19-hour milkings, that's just got worse. Fonterra has been good though. We've gone to night pickups and picking up the milk after that afternoon milking, because it's such a small volume of milk, we're able to restrict the tap right back, and therefore slow the milk going past the cooler or through the cooler, and then they pick it up afterwards. So we're not having any issues with our blend temperature now. We are making some changes though. We're going up to a 21,000 litre vat, and that's got double the cooling capacity on it. And we're also putting in a holding tank where we're going to chill water and pump that through at the start of milking. So there's solutions to all of it, but if you were having issues with cooling beforehand, you definitely want to think about it before you swap to 3 and 2, because it will put a lot more pressure on your cooling.
Cool, thanks, John. And just going to throw this final question here at you as well. I think all of you have experienced this, but in terms of previous seasons where you've swapped onto 3 and 2, you know, in that mid to late lactation period, we've got a farmer asking here, how did your production change, you know, post-Christmas when you're switching from that twice a day to 3 and 2?
Yeah, I guess every year is different, but we've either held or gone up. Like last year, we went up quite significantly. And especially with the 10 to 7, I think it was just 33% more time in the paddock. They had more time for rest, less walking that was using energy. Every year I went, I thought I should have gone maybe 2 months earlier because of that production increase or hold. And we had no change in the sow count every year, so that was never an issue. So yeah, no, we just always saw positive responses from it, and that was what gave us the confidence to try it full season. And we're 15% up for the overall season as well. 10% of that is attributed to 100 more cows, and the other 5%, I mean, it has been a good season, but 10% definitely hasn't restricted it bar for peak milk. But a lot of people struggle around here at peak milk too for whatever reason. Everyone peaked a bit lower and dropped off quite quick, whereas other farms are still dropping off now, and we're holding, if nearly increasing, which is, yeah, very pleasing. And the cows, it's pretty cool. You go and get the cows in now, and you'll see 8-year-old cows jumping around, kicking their back legs out, and they're all in great condition. Like the cows do enjoy it. They are far happier. That's quite clear to see.
And I think Vanessa, if someone's looking to do it this summer as a trial, just over the summer period, I think the key is they have to go when they've still got feed. So they've got to go early, and they've got to continue to feed them fully, like while they transition them into the system. And then they shouldn't really see a drop, John?
No, from what we've seen. And we've done it last year, to be fair. We had no rain through January, and we put them on early February, and we were introducing silage, and we still had that rise. Well, to be fair, we probably howled in February, and then in March when the rain came and we got that quality in grass back, that's when we saw the increase. It probably wasn't an instant increase. It was a hold, and then once you put the good feed back in front of them, that took off.
Yeah, and I think that's something I definitely saw last year when I interviewed a number of farmers around the country. Nick, you're bang on there. Their number one advice was, go early. It's not a strategy to reduce feed inputs. You've got to do it when it's in front of you. So, thanks for picking that up, because it's definitely a big piece of advice. Awesome. Just conscious of time now. We're coming up on 1 o'clock, so we'll wrap up there. I just want to say a huge thank you to John, Nick, Rick, Angela, Daryl and Karen for joining us today. and being, you know, open to sharing your experiences with us and putting yourself under the fire with questions coming from the floor. So, you know, hugely appreciate that you guys are putting yourself and your businesses out there for us to be able to learn from and grow as an industry. So huge thank you for taking an hour out of your day, and I'm sure we'll see some more of you in the future.